Throughout the summer, we've been walking through the book of Revelation, and last week it met with this dynamic crescendo. And this week we turn all the way from the end to all the way at the beginning of the Bible. And what I want you to see is the connection between them, because it is quite intentional. In many ways, you can't understand the beginning of the Bible without having an understanding of the end, and you can't have an understanding of the end of the Bible without an understanding of the beginning. And the beginning and end make sense of the long middle that travels from one to the other. There's a deep continuity between the end and the beginning of the Bible. God, in the end, finally wins what he was looking to achieve in the first place. And even the calamity of human fallenness is redeemed in a way where the end is greater than the beginning. And I'm struck by, we had a lot of prayer requests this morning, and those requests, many of them were out of pain. Our friends, our relatives, our brothers and sisters, our parents are getting to an age that their vessel is breaking down. Others have suffered tragedy. Maybe it's a health collapse at a young age, or maybe it's victims of horrendous violence that have interrupted what should be a joyful, fruitful journey. Last week, a couple of weeks ago, we had this massive Midwestuary conference in Chicago. And this morning we had Forrest and Leon were at the estuary meeting and got a chance to see what estuary is like. There's another conference that's coming up in October in North Carolina. We're trying to have these conferences all over the country because if you have to cross the country, you have a big airfare to pay. But if it's somewhere close where you can drive, you can just drive to the estuary and have the conference. But the conference we had in Chicago is getting some splash. And it's getting some splash in some interesting circles. So this is a podcast of some Reformed pastors and theologians, and they have their little podcast. And Annie Crawford, who came to the conference, and she sort of participates in the online community to a degree, they were talking about it. And these Reformed pastors and theologians were kind of curious about, why is a Reformed minister sort of involved in this estuary thing that they don't understand? And then one of them sort of kind of figured it out, and he said, oh, wow, this guy's from sort of Calvin and the CRC. They have a long history of talking about worldviews. And the other one said, yeah, and Reformed theology has always tried to accentuate the goodness of the created order. Creation, fall, redemption, restoration. That's a way to understand how the Reformed faith looks at the world. The God of redemption is the God of creation. You have a Trinity, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, all work in this story from the beginning to the end, where in the end, what was hoped for from the beginning is achieved and even surpassed. And we talked a lot about decoding in the book of Revelation, and I really tried to push you back from it. All understanding involves decoding, but to try to connect all of the dots can sometimes distract us from the main message of the text. We saw that in the book of Revelation, and this morning I want to help us see that in the beginning of the book of Genesis, because over the last 100 years, 150 years, this has become a controversial passage. And those controversies have distracted us from the main flow and direction of the passage. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the Scopes monkey trial. And if you actually read history about the trial, a lot of what happened in the 1950s and 60s sort of covered over many of the issues beneath the trial. And if you actually dig into what happened at the trial itself, you might be quite surprised by what you learn. Part of the difficulty has been that the first chapter of Genesis has been used by Christians to try to convince other people of the material origins of the world. Now, that's fine. God made the world. God made the material world. But if you want to understand the passage, it's helpful to understand something of why the passage was written the way it was, because the passage was not written at a time when people were skeptical about the origins of the material world. The passage was written at a time when there were all sorts of other competing stories about the world. Stories often of sexual union creating the world, or violence. If you look at the Babylonian myths, you had Marduk killing his mother Tiamat and using her body to create the world. And human beings were supposed to be slaves of the gods. If you look at the Egyptian mythology, you have Nut and Geb, where the sexual union of heaven and earth creates the world. Humans, again, are sort of these little byproducts. And if you look at even the contemporary stories and mythology about creation, human beings are byproducts. And as we go through this story in Genesis, human beings are not incidental byproducts of creation. They are in many ways right at the center of it. And we'll see that. The thing is that the text assumes creation is not random. It wasn't random for the Babylonians. It wasn't random for the Egyptians. It wasn't random for the Hebrews. In our mythology today, a materialist mythology, they say creation is random. Human beings are a byproduct. There's no meaning and purpose here. But if you start with God, the text tells you about the relationship between the Creator God and His world. The Israelites, along with everyone else in the ancient world, believed instead that every event was an act of deity. That every plant that grew, every baby born, every drop of rain, every climactic disaster was an act of God. That bears witness today. People go into a place like Yosemite and they say, this feels spiritual. And even insurance companies, when a hurricane goes through, what do they call it? An act of God. That remains just under the surface in our culture, but it was simply assumed when this story first came out in the ancient Near East. No natural laws governed the cosmos. Deity ran the cosmos or was inherent in it. There were no miracles in the sense of events deviating from that which was natural. They were only signs of the deity's activity, sometimes favorable, sometimes not. In Mesopotamia, one way to accomplish this was to name something, because a name designated a thing's function or role. Thus, in the Babylonian creation account, bringing the cosmos into existence begins when on high no name was given in heaven, nor below was netherworld called by name, when no gods at all had been brought forth, none called by name, no destinies ordained, then the gods were formed. If creation is the act of bringing something into existence, we must ask what constitutes existence in the ancient world. Let me ask you this. Do marriages exist? Some of you will say, well, absolutely. Either you experience them in the past or you experience them present. You can watch how they change our action. I will say, where can you find your marriage? Well, can you pick it up? Can you poke at it? Well, I say, well, I poke at my marriage sometimes when I tease my spouse. But your marriage isn't a material thing. It's a relational thing. And in the ancient world, the reason naming is connected with this idea of creation was the most important things in our life Well, the material sort of comes and goes. We eat the food, we have cars, we have houses. But when people lie on their deathbed, they don't say, I wish I had more stuff. They say, I wish I had better relationships. In our culture, we consider existence to be either material, having molecules taking up space, extending to energy, subatomic particles, or experiential, abstractions such as love or time. Those definitions, however, are culturally determined by our culture. By contrast, in the ancient world, something existed when it had a function, a role to play. If you're driving down the road and you see a car with lights on and someone gets out with a uniform and you think, how fast was I going? That's just a man wearing clothes, but you're thinking about his function. In Mesopotamia, one way to accomplish this was to name something, because a name designated a thing's function or role. Thus, in Babylonian creation account, bringing the cosmos into existence begins when on high no name was given in heaven, which we just read. The actual Hebrew word bara, which we translate create, focuses our attention in this direction. You might ask someone, are you God's creation? And many people will say, I am made by God. You go to Yosemite, you say, it was made by God. And I will say, well, what does that mean? Is that like Zeus and a goose? No. You had two parents. I thought your parents made you. Yeah, my parents made me. But God made me through them. Oh. A mayor creates a police officer. The voters create a president. What creates a marriage? It's a ceremony. It's a promise. All the materiality, that's simply assumed. When you watch people get married, you don't think, are they real human beings? In fact, if someone said they're married and they're not human beings, you would say, you can't marry your dog. That's not a marriage. Can't see it under a microscope, but it's omnipresent in a certain sphere. You assume the materiality of the man and the woman and the generations before them that brought ancestors into being. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. God saw that the light was good. And he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and morning the first day. It wasn't until 40 or 50 years after I had been reading this passage all my life that I didn't see the most obvious thing in the passage. Why didn't God call the light light? I've read the passage all my life. What is light? What do we call it? We call it light. He called the light day, and he called the darkness night. He spoke its function within our world into being. God is creating a habitable space for the goal of his good creation. His creation has purpose. No longer will there be any curse, we read last week. The throne of God and the Lamb will be in the city, and his servants will serve him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. See the name stuff? There will be no more night. And we saw that. We're like, well, wait a minute. What does that mean? Why was night good in creation, and why is night being banished here? What had become of night? Well, we'll see that in the middle of the story. but you all sort of know it if you're walking through a scary jungle or a scary neighborhood or a scary house and it's dark. You know something. And God said, let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water. So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. God called the vault sky. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. And God said, let the waters under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear. And it was so. And God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. One of the funny things that we should know in the Central Valley is that water and land, if they're all mixed up, it's a problem. But if you have water over here and land over there, and you can sort of manage them in proper order, what do you get? Crops, houses, productivity. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds. And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed according to its kind. Notice the seed is mentioned again and again and again. Why? Because it's going to keep going. All of this. I'm so glad Nina picked that Let All Things Now Living song, because that song has a sense of, wow, this is a beautiful crescendo. This is a beautiful symphony. All of God's creation, and it goes generation to generation to generation. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning, the third day. And God said, let there be lights in the vault in the sky to separate the day from the night. And we all like day, and we like night for certain things. If you go up to Alaska or the North Pole, and it's day all summer, people get a little crazy because they're like, I want to sleep. If you go up there in the winter, people get a little crazy. I want to see the sun. Day and night. We're built for those two things. God made two great lights, the great light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the vault in the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and morning, the fourth day. And God said, let the waters teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky. So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living thing with which the waters teem and that moved in it according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number, and fill the waters in the sea, and let the birds increase in the earth. And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds. We had birds in the sky, fish in the sea, now on the land, livestock, creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind, and it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the air, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. And you see this. We human beings, the image of God, the apes don't worry about their existence. The chimps don't worry about their existence. The salmon don't worry about their existence. The cranes don't worry about their existence. We rule over them and worry about them and for them, for their habitat. We are in the image of God right in the middle because we've been given this creation and God says, it's glorious and wonderful and good. Now, make it great. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we don't. So God created mankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Now, most of you are unfamiliar with all the other stories that the Hebrews would have known. Gilgamesh and Enkidu. If you read Gilgamesh and Enkidu, what are women in that story? You know what they are? They're prostitutes, or they're baby factories. The main relationship between Gilgamesh and Enkidu are two men. In this story, it's a very strange story in the ancient world because they say the image of God is not a man. The image of God is divided into man and woman. And that division, as we'll see in the next chapter, that division, when put back together, does something. Well, you can see it among the animals, but it makes more of those middle creatures, those creatures in the image of God who rule. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number. Same thing he said to the animals. But we're the rulers that are increasing in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Then God said, I will give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit and has seed in it. They will be yours for food, and all the beasts of the earth and the birds of the air and the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Now this is a verse people fight about all of the days up until now, and this verse they sort of, I don't know what this is about. We know what years are, traveling of the sun that governs the year. We know what months are, traveling the moon that governs the month. 7? There's no 7. There's no week in nature. In the modernist view that Genesis 1 is an account of material origins, day 7 is mystifying. It appears to be nothing more than an afterthought, with theological concerns about Israelites observing the Sabbath, an appendix, a postscript, a tack-on. In contrast, a reader from the ancient world would know immediately what was going on and recognize the role of day 7. Without hesitation, the ancient reader would conclude that this is a temple text and that day 7 is the most important of the 7 days. Now, if you were with us during Revelation, the temple in heaven. Everything's coming from the temple in heaven. The temple of earth was designed to mirror the temple in heaven. This cube comes down from the sky, and it's the same thing so that it actually sort of fits into the Holy of Holies, making it complete. It's all about temple. The difficulty is we struggle with what temple means. If you looked at the Hebrew temple and the tabernacle, you discover that it's filled with images. No image of God, but lots of other images, almond trees and fish and bulls and all kinds of things, and seraphim, because the temple itself was a microcosm, a miniature of the entire creation. And what they did when they went to the temple was maintain the creation. Why did the Aztecs do all that human sacrifice? Did you ever learn about that? They did all that human sacrifice because they said, if we don't have these great sacrifices, the gods will destroy the world. All over the world, everyone built temples as these little models in order to manage and keep the creation going. So the Hebrew temple was like that. Now, things shift, though, when we come to churches. Some of you might have learned a little song when you were children. The church is not a steeple. The church is not a building. The church is not a resting place. What is the church? The church is the people. This building we're in, we call it a church. Sometimes it's called a meeting hall. We call it lots of different things. But you are the church. You get a sense of that functionality. Because this building can be used for many things. But you are something that is created and named. God achieves in the end what he started from the beginning. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne say, "Look, God's dwelling is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There'll be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." The temple in the beginning and the temple in the end. Temples mean God with his people. Now, we've had a lot of unproductive spats over this beautiful text. They'll likely sort of pass away. The point of the text is in some ways more difficult for many of us to imagine, because the text says something startling and difficult, which is that God is good and he cares for this world, and that we have spoiled a good world and made it like it is. But the Creator God is the Redeemer God. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created. We read John 1 as part of the liturgy. Things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authority, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead. Jesus is the beginning of creation 2.0. Jesus is the beginning of the new creation that descends from heaven. For God was pleased to have all of his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things. The reclamation of the world is the reconciliation not just of human beings or souls, but the entire created order. And through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on a cross. In some ways, the rest of the Bible is footnotes, because there's the story. Where do we fit in? Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior. But now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. If you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. This is the gospel that you heard, and that has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven. Did you hear that? How is the gospel proclaimed to every creature? Now, you can go home today and you can set the dog down and say, Rex, I got something to tell you. Go ahead, you tell Rex the gospel. But you show Rex the gospel by ruling over Rex in the way that God and Jesus rules over us. Well, how do I rule over Rex? Well, you give him his food, you give him his health care, you give him all of these things. I say, that doesn't sound a lot like ruling. That sounds a lot like I'm serving Rex. Yeah, that's a lot of what ruling means. But also, you don't let Rex poop in the house. You don't let Rex bite your neighbor. You rule over Rex so that Rex can be the best pet possible. You proclaim the gospel to Rex by ruling over him properly. Well, how do we learn this? Not by tyranny, but by Christ. Paul understood this. This is the gospel that you heard that has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven, and which I, Paul, the apostle, and hopefully us too, have become a servant. What you do with Rex, what you do with the squirrels, what you do with the plants, what you do at work, what you do with your children and your parents, and everything is all part of worship and rulership, which often looks a lot like service. It's temple work. It's relational participation. And in many ways, if it's true in the temple, it's true in the world, which is exactly why Christianity focuses on this meal. And in John 13, first, of course, Jesus comes in. They're going to celebrate the Passover. Jesus strips down, wraps a towel around him, and starts washing their feet. And Peter says, no, don't do this. You can't wash my feet. And Jesus says, unless you let me serve you, you can have no part of me, because you need my service. I need to do something for you so that you can do something for the rest of the world. So on the night he was betrayed, he took bread and he broke it. And he said, this is my body. This is my body. And they didn't know it yet, and it would be the sum of all their fears. But that next day, they would watch his body broken. And it was for them. And this man who could still the storm and make the lame jump and make the blind see, why couldn't he deal with a bunch of soldiers with pointed sticks? And he was mocked because he didn't. But he said, no, I need you to see what rulership looks like. I'm going to go under you and wash your feet and make you clean. And then I will be over you and say, do this in remembrance of me.